welcome President and CEO of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, Joe Reardon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first ever virtual Go Global KC event with our World Trade Center Kansas City team. We're so glad you're here with us this afternoon. Like so many of you, the Chamber has moved to doing nearly everything virtual, but we're still able to bring you our signature events like Go Global KC, where we're going to showcase KC's international trade economy. And for all of us that are in Kansas City, it's so important to realize how critical trade is to our everyday lives. And in fact, the city that we get to prosper in and benefit from today is really built on trade. And trade in Kansas City and the Midwest in general is very important, even though we're right in the center of the country. And as COVID has crippled our overall economy, we don't think it's the time at all to take focus off of trade. So here's a couple of factoids about how important trade is to KC. The region exports more than $7 billion in goods each year. Global trade also supports jobs, more than 65,000 jobs in Kansas City directly and indirectly. More than 100,000 Kansas jobs are supported by trade, and in Missouri, more than 215,000. You can see that Kansas City has a strong global presence, and today we're going to celebrate that and talk a lot about it too. We have a very full program of a lot of good things, and you'll get to hear from our keynote speaker, Pete Mento, the Managing Director and Practice Leader for Crow LLP's Global Customs and Duty Practice. In this role, Pete is responsible for the growth and development of a multinational practice that focuses on the elimination, recovery, and reduction of tariffs for their clients, as well as assisting them in matters of trade compliance and cargo security. I suspect Pete's been very busy recently. You'll also get to look at the current state of KC trade in a fireside chat with Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas, moderated by Mark Johnson of Dentons. Of course, we'll also announce our 2020 Outstanding Economic Development Agency and Outstanding Service Provider Awards, and you'll get an update on the Greater Kansas City Regional Export Plan. And for the first time, this is really cool, thanks to technology, later on you'll be able to connect directly with representatives from our fellow World Trade Centers around the world: Portugal, Mexico, India, Canada, Ireland, and more. I want to thank our sponsors for making Go Global KC possible this year. We cannot do this without their wonderful support. Thanks to our global sponsors, Children's Mercy, Dentons, and Husch Blackwell. And thanks to our corporate sponsors, Black & Veatch, Modus Light, and Commerce Bank. And I also want to acknowledge our World Trade Center leaders here in Kansas City, Melissa Miller and Caitlin Bast, who do such a great job, as well as our stellar events team, Laura Dryden and Sydney Wycliffe. And now, from Commerce Bank, it's my pleasure to introduce the Senior Vice President and Manager of International Banking, Brian Gordon.
Thank you, Joe. The lyrics from Bob Dylan's 1964 hit song, "Times They Are A-Changin'," could not ring more true than over the past 6 months. But we all adapt and we all push forward. I know we would all like 2020 to be over, but this year marks the 4th successful year of implementation for the Kansas City Metro Export Plan. Without the support of the KC Chamber leadership, specifically Joe Reardon and Scott Hall, the World Trade Center KC staff and interns, the World Trade Center Investor Partners and Advisory Board, and the fantastic ecosystem of companies who support businesses looking to grow their cross-border trade or to complete their first international sale, we would not have any good news to report. And yet there are some very bright spots and highlights worth noting during a time when global trade has not fared so well. Here are year-to-date numbers and activities of the GCI efforts in Kansas City. To date, there are 163 clients in the Export Concierge Program. 74 of those remain active, regular clients, of which 40 are new to export and 23 have added a new sale to a new market. 92 Export Concierge clients are from Missouri counties, with 64 being from Kansas counties. 18 are from outside the Kansas City metropolitan statistical area. The diversity of industries involved is also a highlight to report. 50 export concierge clients are from service industries, 46 are from the manufacturing sector, and 21 are in wholesale trades. 16 in retail trades, and a handful of others in transportation, construction, agriculture, and a handful of other sectors. So let me close by circling back to the ecosystem. One of the significant advantages of being in the Midwest, with Midwestern values of friendliness, helpfulness, and teamwork, is that people want to help other people succeed. It is that advantage that makes the Export Concierge Program so unique and successful. The folks at the Brookings Institution noted it early on as a differentiator compared to our peer cities. When one wins, we all win. All trade and collaboration floats all boats higher. Every dollar of new export sales is new money arriving in the United States, bolstering our economy. Every contact shared, another company network adds to the global ecosystem, but it starts with a great local ecosystem, and we have that in spades. These are just a few highlights of the ongoing commitment of the KC Chamber, the World Trade Center team, and the support system of great partners who support regional businesses' growth towards trade. With the support of the regional business leaders, service providers, economic development agencies, World Trade Center investors, and all our international partner organizations, we can continue to put Kansas City on the map, giving companies to have access to the tools and services they need to grow and thrive globally. I'm not a huge user of hashtags, but hashtag trade matters is my go-to hashtag. Please use it in your emails, your LinkedIn posts, your tweets, your WeChats, your Facebook posts, billboards, painted murals, tattoos, yard signs, tractor trailers driving down the highway. I think you get my point. More people need to hear it. Thanks for being here today, and thank you for all you do to promote thinking globally.
To discuss the results of the Princeton trade study and the impacts of tariffs on business, please welcome Dr. Jack Zhang, Assistant Professor of Political Science at the University of Kansas.
Thank you very much for having me here at Go Global KC. I'm excited to present the results of a survey that is a collaborative effort between the Princeton Trade Study, of which the KU Trade War Lab that I direct is a participant, in collaboration with the Kansas City Chamber of Commerce and the World Trade Center here. The survey studies the impact of the trade war on greater Kansas City area businesses. And let me begin with a little bit of background about the trade wars. And in particular, I'm going to focus my remarks on the US-China trade war, which is by far the largest front in the numerous trade conflicts that have started under the Trump administration, some of which are ongoing, some of which are finished. The China trade war started in 2018. Average tariffs have increased on Chinese exports by more than six-fold since then, and Chinese retaliatory tariffs have more than doubled on US products. The trade war has become, I think at this point it's safe to say, a war of attrition. The phase one trade deal leaves most of the tariffs in place. 2/3 of imports from China are still covered by tariffs. Major economic issues like industrial policy remain unresolved. There is no clear goal in sight, and the trade two phase deal is highly unlikely, at least before the November 2020 elections. What all of this means is that businesses and consumers in both countries continue to suffer in the trenches by paying the cost of tariffs, which are taxes on imported goods. And so how has the trade war impacted the businesses in the greater Kansas City region? We may expect, based on the results of a Brookings study that finds that the KC Metro is the 9th in the country in terms of trade war exposure, about 810 million, according to their estimation, or about 7.8% of exports here face retaliatory tariffs. And so going into this, we would expect that Kansas City area businesses are going to be more adversely affected than in the country. A little bit about the survey. So as I mentioned, this is a collaboration between PTS and the KC Chamber and WTC. The The Princeton Trade Study is an effort, a multi-campus effort to survey American businesses to understand the impact of the trade war. We took the same exact questions and created a module, which the KC Chamber was kind enough to field to their members, beginning in February 2020. The first wave of recruitment hit about 3,000 firms through a newsletter, social media campaign, and email blast. Responses for that were relatively low, and so we switched to personalized emails for those on the chamber mailing lists in April, and then another wave in June. And so in total, that brings us up to about 72 respondents so far, or about a 2% response rate. I think that number is closer to about 80 now. The survey is still ongoing. And the completion rate, because not everyone who starts the survey actually finish it, is about 54%. So that leaves us about 40 responses that I'm going to talk about. Of these respondents, they range from large to small companies. The number of employees of respondents range from 1 to 8,000. So we have mom and pop shops here, as well as multinational corporations. The median number of employees is about 27. The breakdown of respondents by industry shows that the majority comes from three broad sectors: manufacturing, professional and other services, wholesale and retail. With about a third in manufacturing, about 20% in each of the others. We have a number of other industries represented, including transportation, warehousing, agriculture, finance, and healthcare, et cetera, but these three are the dominant ones. And the big takeaway from the survey results is that the vast majority of respondents in the Kansas City area report being harmed by tariffs. About 76% say on this, in response to this question about whether trade tariffs have harmed or helped them, say that they have been harmed. This is significantly higher than the national sample, which is under 50%, and only about 16% say that they are helped. We also ask companies whether their suppliers have raised prices as a result of the trade war, which is one of the ways that these tax hikes have been passed on to businesses, and 69% of our respondents say that they have. We also learned that businesses rely primarily on industry associations for trade war advocacy. 77% of respondents to the question of whether they participate in a trade or business association said yes. In comparison, only 35% of respondents have a government relations officer or team. The majority do not, and a very small percentage, 8%, have sought outside help from law firms or consultants regarding the trade war, meaning that the majority of the advocacy done on the trade war by companies in the region are through business associations. We also found this puzzling result both in the Kansas City sample and also in the national sample, which is the lack of political action in response to tariffs, even by those companies that claim that they've been harmed. So we asked generally companies whether they've taken any kind of political action, defined as contacting a legislator, supporting a policy, signing a petition, lobbying, et cetera, to our respondents, and 67% of respondents in the region say yes. A majority in the country also report yes on this question. However, when asked whether companies have taken political action specifically on tariffs, only 28% of companies report taking political action on tariffs. If you break down that 28%, into whether companies claim that they were hurt or helped, which helps us gather what direction the political action takes. Only a third of companies that answer that they've been harmed by tariffs report political action. So the majority of companies that are being hurt have not taken action so far. We have also had the fortune or misfortune of fielding the survey right as the COVID-19 pandemic was spreading throughout the nation. And so in the second and third wave, we were able to add a question phrased in a similar way as our question about tariffs to gauge the relative impact of the two challenges. Now, we know that the COVID-19 pandemic is quite challenging for businesses, but the surprising result is that only 33% in our survey report being hurt by COVID-19. By comparison, right, almost double that number say that they're hurt by tariffs, to give you a relative sense of magnitude of the two crises. Of the respondents, 65% also support this national push to have tariff relief or suspension as part of the COVID-19 recovery efforts. There's legislation like this going through DC right now that has not succeeded so far, but a majority of companies in the KC region support these initiatives. And finally, looking ahead to try to understand the impact of the trade war and the attitude of businesses on upcoming on politics ahead, we asked, of course, in the lead up to the 2020 elections, whether a candidate's stance on tariffs will play a role in whether companies will support them, and a majority of respondents say yes. And of these, the majority within that 54% are those companies that answer that they've been harmed by tariffs, right? So those that are seeking help with dealing with the trade war in particular are looking to candidates to take a stance in the upcoming elections. Finally, as if you have been following in the news, you'll know that U.S.-China relations have hit a low point in 50 years. The latest Pew poll shows that the American public, 74% respond with an unfavorable attitude towards China. But in our sample of respondents, 51% of businesses in the KC region still see a growing Chinese economy as good for their business, while only 8% see it as a bad thing. And so even though we're at a dark point in terms of bilateral relations, I think there is hope moving forward for continued economic cooperation and a resolution to this trade war. At least that is the hope of many respondents to our survey in the region. Finally, I'd like to conclude by thanking first the respondents to the survey. Thank you for those of you who've taken your time to answer this. Some of you won tickets that we raffled off to attend this event. So thank you. A big thank you also to Caitlin Bass and her team at the KC Chamber, and to my research assistants at the KU Trade War Lab for assistance administering the survey over the last 4 or 5 months. For more information about this project, or if you have any questions about these results, please email me and my email here and my website. And finally, I'd like to encourage everyone who's watching this presentation to please share your company's experience with the trade war. We'd like to hear from companies whether you have been harmed or helped or not impacted by the trade war. We'd like to hear from as many companies in the region as possible before we report these results. And so if you can take 5 minutes to either click on this link or scan the QR code, the survey is still open and we welcome your input. Thank you very much and look forward to hearing from you.
Please welcome Melissa Miller, Senior Manager of the World Trade Center Kansas City, and Caitlin Bass, Manager of the World Trade Center Kansas City.
Starting in 2018, the World Trade Center Kansas City has recognized an economic development agency and a service provider in the Kansas City metro area whose commitment to international trade and the Global Cities Initiative has been truly outstanding. We are pleased to announce the winner of this year's Outstanding Economic Development Agency is the Overland Park Chamber Economic Development Council. The Overland Park Chamber Economic Development Council is not only committed to attracting new companies and jobs to their community, but also to working hard to make sure their existing companies prosper and grow. Many of these companies have an international component or contribute to the KC export economy. Their efforts to ensure economic vitality mean more customers and a healthier community in which to live and work. Please join us in congratulating the Overland Park Chamber Economic Development Council.
Thank you, Caitlin and Melissa. On behalf of Beth Johnson, who you see on the screen as well, and Tracy Osborne-Olchen, our president, and our Chamber Board of Directors, I'd like to thank Go Global KC for this recognition and for being our partner in international trade. You all have always been there for us, but in the past few years, you've really stepped up and we've come to rely on you even more. In kind of thinking about this event, Beth and I reflected on just a few examples. Recently, you helped us in preparing for our annual trip to Washington, D.C. and meeting with Representative Davids. in the passage of the USMCA and gathering information for us on Canada, Mexico, Japan, China, Germany, etc. You've also helped us in preparing information specific to Germany for our sister city visit, and then for getting us involved in the Riddle of the Exporter programming, and really helping us to grow our knowledge base in international trade so that we could better help our local businesses. These are really just a few of the examples of how you've been there for us. So in closing, I'd especially like to thank Melissa and Caitlin, because you all have really raised the bar in the outreach that you've done to Overland Park and Johnson County, and for that we are very grateful. So thank you again.
Thanks so much and congratulations. Now we are pleased to announce this year's Outstanding Service Provider, Commerce Bank. As one of the first banks in the Midwest to offer international banking services, Commerce Bank continues its leadership role today. Their technology, experience, and international contacts provide the full service found only in the most sophisticated global banks, but offered by a bank that truly understands your needs. Their staff of banking professionals is experienced in international finance products and can provide the counsel, technology, and services needed to conduct business around the world. Join us in congratulating Commerce Bank.
Thanks, Caitlin and Melissa. I would like to go back to my comments for the GCI update and say it's really being a part of an ecosystem like we have here in Kansas City is really very rewarding. And if it wasn't for the operations people on our team, our customers wouldn't get great service. So it's really Susan and Yoya and Teresa and Jennifer and Cece and Etoy and Stacy and all those folks and our FX desk guys, Jeff and Jamie and Rich, who provide that service to our clients that is really what drives our success, is helping our customers succeed. So thank you very much for the award. And let me put this up again.
Thank you, Brian. Each year during the KC Chamber celebration, one company is recognized for their efforts globally with the International Small Business of the Year Award. This award was renamed last year in honor of Paul Wida of Black & Veatch for his longstanding support of the Kansas City international business community. The nominees for the 2020 Wida Award for International Small Business of the Year are BNIM, Binkle Williams Architecture, Messenger Coffee, Midtown Signs, ProPrint Digital, Rising Sun Solar, The Shark Off, Signal Theory, The Story Scribe, and Ultratech Aerospace. As a proponent for international trade, World Trade Center Kansas City is proud to be involved in this award, and we offer our congratulations to this year's nominees. Please tune in on October 15th for our Kansas City Chamber Small Business Celebration Awards Luncheon to find out which of these amazing companies will win the 2020 Wida Award for International Small Business of the Year. Thank you.
Please welcome from Husch Blackwell, International Trade and Intellectual Property Attorney, Bo Jackson.
Hi, I'm Bo, and good afternoon. Thank you for being here with us and taking part in this timely event. At Husch Blackwell, we understand the importance of global trade. That is why we're one of the only law firms based in the American heartland that offers a full-service international trade group, helping clients with trade remedies, customs, tariffs, intellectual property, supply chain logistics, foreign investment, and trade policy issues. We are proud to be headquartered right here in Kansas City and in St. Louis, and we take particular satisfaction in helping Midwestern companies achieve their international business objectives. So let's turn to our speaker. We have a great keynote for you today. A self-proclaimed trade nerd and former professional stand-up comedian, Pete Mento is passionate about international trade and economics. Pete is a customs house broker, foreign relations expert, and trade academic. He holds an ALM in government with a trade theory focus from Harvard University. Pete has published numerous international trade articles, created a trade school online training series for international business, and started the Trade Geek podcast, where he focuses on global trade issues in humorous ways. Currently the managing director and practice leader for Crow LLP's Global Customs and Duty Practice, Pete assists clients in trade compliance, cargo security, and tariff reduction. So it's no surprise that Pete is one of the world's leading experts on international trade policy and supply chain security. I know we will all benefit from and enjoy Pete's commentary here today. So please join me in welcoming Pete Mento.
Hey everybody, quite an introduction. And thank you all for giving me an opportunity today to talk to you during what has got to be one of the weirdest times to be engaged in international trade. I do appreciate it. And in this short time that we have together, I really wanted to talk to you about where I see the future going for those of us who are engaged in international trade. You know, it's strange. When people normally would ask me to talk about the future of trade, it was all pretty rosy. The United States was in a position where our economy was really catapulting us far beyond most other nations. And to understand that, we have to really come to grips with an idea that most people have a hard time really getting their arms around. And that's that products don't matter as much as the ideas behind them. I bet a lot of you are shaking your heads and trying to figure out how to get in touch with me to tell me how wrong I am. And don't worry, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and she tells me regularly how wrong I am. I don't need anybody else doing that. But ask yourself a quick question. Would you rather have a share of stock in Apple, who comes up with these amazing ideas for technology, or share in the stock of Foxconn, who builds them? The answer should be pretty elementary. The American economy and those of a number of other nations is transforming itself into this new paradigm where we're beginning to come up with absolutely amazing ideas. Many of us just a month ago, or a little over a month ago, I guess, watched as SpaceX, a commercial company in partnership with the US government, brought a number of our astronauts up to the International Space Station. It wasn't a country, it was a corporation. And this was the culmination of decades of partnerships between the government and private citizens, incredible scientists from around the world, working to replace government costs. It was a beautiful moment. And then to see those booster rockets land right down on their tails, to be used over and over again. This is the new economy, an economy based on ideas. Now, my colleague a few moments ago talked about how we're engaged in a trade war where we're trying to control these ideas from being stolen, which is really the whole point of this trade war. In the middle of all of this, in the middle of us fighting a trade war with China, beginning a trade war with Europe, and closing down a massive negotiation to create a new trade bloc with our friends in Mexico and Canada, something unprecedented happens, a pandemic. As was mentioned a few moments ago, I do a lot of work in the area of counterterrorism. Didn't mean to. I'm clearly not Jack Bauer. If you ask me to chase anything, it better be a pizza or a beer with a shot, because I am not aerobic in any sense of the imagination. But because of 9/11, like many of you, I had to get engaged in counterterrorism. I had to get working on things like CTPAT and AEO. And because I'm an academic, I ended up working a lot on trying to understand the basis of jihad and how it was affected by economics. More specifically, I began to look at how the supply chain could be used in a terrorist action. Along those lines, I had always worried about a pandemic. I'd always looked at how there was an opportunity for a bomb to go off in a port and what it could do for an economy. But when I began to look at biological weapons, I had said many times, going back as far as 2012, that the real danger to an economy was an actual pandemic. I gave speeches for both TAPA and the PCSC where I spoke about that, one for ICPA as well. The numbers were staggering, and it turns out my numbers weren't nearly deep enough on how it could affect an entire economy. So we find ourselves today, a few months away from a presidential election, where we have the US and China still engaged in this trade war, really no one knowing when a vaccine could happen, months away from a presidential election with two very different candidates, and a world not knowing what the next steps will really show us. And that's where I'm at to talk to you today. It's crazy. Now, if I knew exactly what was going to happen, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I'd be liquidating all of my assets, playing the stock market, and trying to find some island to go wait on for the rest of my life. I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you what I think. I can give you an idea of what an educated guess might be for the next steps. And I suppose that's what I'm going to share with you today. But in order to do that, I've got to talk to you about some of the factors to that fall. We have to understand that 2019 and 2020 are going to go down in history as the years that we had to come to grips with the fact that our ideas of supply chains failed. For many companies, the idea that they could put all their eggs in one basket, that we could essentially trust supply chains where China was the only option, really came to bite us on the backside. We also learned quickly that we didn't have a plan B. Geopolitics took center stage after a long while of it not being an issue at all. And tariffs began to matter. I was going all over the country for years saying, you mind if I take a look at your customs data to see if I can save you some money? And countless companies said, why? I don't pay tariffs on practically anything. All of a sudden it became a major issue. And we had a president who had said, I'm going to go after China in a trade battle, and no one believed him. And lo and behold, he did. A lot of folks lost their jobs because they weren't prepared for something like this. On top of all of this, we had Brexit looming. And for many people, this was actually the big threat. And it turns out it was probably the smallest one of all, huh? But it's still out there, and most people aren't doing anything about it. Now, as China loomed and it began to go to this phase one agreement, many of the things that were agreed upon simply haven't been actioned on yet. We haven't done those things that we promised we would do, nor has China, frankly. And we're about to have a re-examining of it before we move on with these negotiations. The likelihood that China will take actions on that until there's a presidential election is extremely low. So here we are with two very different presidential candidates, but the likelihood of us simply walking away or abandoning this trade war if we have a different president is extremely low. I am very, very old these days. I spend a tremendous amount of my time trying to figure out precisely what it is my daughter is listening to on the radio. I'm constantly screaming at children to get off my lawn. Everything hurts. I hate everyone and everything. I can tell you that I remember the 80s. I do. I remember a time not long ago when it was the Democrats that were constantly asking us to do something about China. I can remember the 90s when it was the Democrats who simply couldn't believe that we were going to enter into any sort of free trade agreement with China. It was the Republicans that were always pushing this stuff. And now we find ourselves in the exact opposite situation with a Republican president who is pushing trade restrictions and Democrats who are trying to do something about it. It is highly unlikely that if President Biden were to win his first term, that he will do anything to stop this trade war quickly. Now, it is likely, however, that a President Biden administration will do something to try to slow it down or to make it end more quickly. But we should not forget that labor will want to push the Democratic Party to do something about these trade restrictions to make them last. And that the United States still has much to gain by looking at that future economy, one that relies on intelligence, that one that relies on innovation and finding ways to protect it. So one way or the other, we're going to continue to go down this road. I wouldn't expect that Mr. Trump is going to stop it anytime soon. And I certainly wouldn't expect that Mr. Biden will stop it quickly. So bear in mind that it's going to happen one way or the other. Now, there are other free trade agreements that we are negotiating or looking at. There's, of course, US-Japan. We are still looking at the TPP. Depending on how Brexit shakes up, there could be a US-UK one, a US-European one. The list goes on and on. What I'm more concerned with, though, is what happens in the face of this pandemic. The last time I gave a public speech was in March. It was right before St. Patrick's Day. And at the time, there were only 101,000 cases of COVID-19 in the world and only 3,400 deaths. And now I believe we're up to what, 17, 18 million cases. The fact is, this thing is spread like wildfire, and along with it, a collapse of an economy. To put into context just how many people in America lost their job between March and the end of July, beginning of August, you would have to combine, imagine if every single man, woman, and child in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, New Jersey, Virginia, the District of Columbia, and Delaware lost all of their income. That's how many people have lost their jobs. And it happens because our economy is generally still based on social interactions and the people who support those social interactions. And when that breaks down and there isn't a need to support them, it's this trickle-down effect that breaks them all with them. And to be honest, folks, until there's some sort of a vaccine, I don't see it getting any better. The post-COVID-19 supply chains, the things that come with them, are going to come from a rethinking of how we look at supply chains. Before I got on this call, we had a bit of a conversation room going on, and I was talking to people who are looking at using more and more automation, of trying to find ways to fully automate their supply chains and take people out of them for the actual production and construction of goods, because they don't think this is the last time we're going to be dealing with this. What does a resilient supply chain mean now? It doesn't just mean other vendors for logistics. It means other vendors in other places, in other countries for the actual production of your goods. It means having other jurisdictions in case there's another trade war that you can go to produce them, knowing that they have made your product and that they're ready to make it next time. I personally believe, and this is something that we've been talking to clients about, you need to take a step back. Look at what's happened to your production and your supply chain post-COVID-19 and say, here's what went wrong. Here are the things that could have been done better. We know that we had issues here, here, and here. Don't point the finger at individuals, but rather look at the process itself and consider ways that you could have made it better. Do some supply chain triage. Two things to consider, right? Without passenger aircraft increasing, because we don't have people coming in from China, that means that it's cargo aircraft that are moving cargo to the US, and that there's not a glut of that. So until we begin to see people coming in from Asia, you're not going to have more capacity on aircraft. Ocean. The ocean carriers have always been a bit of a cartel, right? They operate in a different way. And they've been very good about holding the line on precisely how much space and how much capacity, how many slots they're going to have coming into the US. They haven't broken the line. They've done a very good job of working together to make sure that they don't have excess capacity. So with a constrained capacity on ocean and intensely constrained capacity on air freight, it's getting expensive to move cargo in a down economy with less imports and exports. Who would have thought that? In a world with a glut of global oil production, this makes absolutely no sense. But it's because they're learning to constrain capacity. I believe also that you're going to see the governments of the world make partnerships with industry to say, what happens the next time we have this issue? Are we going to be able to work together to find ways to use logistics in our supply chains to bring in PPE, to find ways to keep supply chains moving in a meaningful way for the warfighter, for our supply chains for food, so that we do have food security? I don't think anyone ever believed that the US would be in a constrained situation like we are now. I certainly never did. And then lastly on that line, have we ever thought about how we're going to secure working capital in a down economy? I don't believe you're going to be able to go back to your transportation vendors and squeeze blood from a stone. I don't know how much opportunity is going to be there right now in a world where capacity is constrained. I don't know how you're going to go back to them thinking, well, there's not a lot of consumers, so we can probably go back and squeeze some opportunity out of them. I don't see it. Their vendors are squeezing them for more money. I don't see how you're going to get it out of them. I don't see how it's going to be possible. Focus on strategic sourcing. Look at other places to have your goods made. I cannot stress enough how the economies of places like Mexico, places like Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, certainly Thailand, are cleaning up. In the wake of the COVID-19 issues, in the wake of all the things that are going on in China with the trade war, there has been an absolutely incredible opportunity that has sprung up for these other countries that have strong supply chains to pick up capacity where there isn't these massive 301 tariffs. And what American consumers and American producers are learning is the products are good, as is the quality. So keep in mind that that's a place for you to get some opportunity. And then lastly, on that particular topic, I would begin to also think long-term. Think long-term. Have the strategic vision about where you want to look for production in the future. Begin to look at ways that the US economy is moving towards these other areas of the world to find opportunity. Find opportunity for production and ask yourself, will they have capacity? Are they building new airports? Are there new ports in line that are moving that way? Something I don't think anyone's really considering right now that sort of came to mind to me today, Russia and Mr. Putin. Russia and Mr. Putin today did this announcement that they've come up with the COVID-19 vaccine. Who knows if it works? I certainly don't. I'm not going to get in line to take a vaccine from Russia, but who knows? Maybe it works. Imagine in a world where we are all dreadfully terrified of catching this terrible virus, when a virus proves to be effective, and we begin to purchase not millions, not hundreds of millions of doses, but literally billions of doses that are going to be in an effective cold chain. They're going to have to move. Not only are they going to have to move, but all of the PPE associated with its distribution and with its effective dosage is going to have to move. You're going to have rubber gloves. You're going to have syringes, or however they give it for the nose mist, who knows? All of this is going to happen. Imagine that. Imagine actually moving all of these doses. Do you think they're going to move ocean? Do you think we're going to make them all here in the United States? Maybe we do. What's the trucking capacity for that going to be like? Has anyone considered the logistical constraints of having this vaccine suddenly sent out in the world? Just the first doses of it that will go to our military, to the people that we have that are going to be in our first responders, to very important people in our government, and then to the people like you and I. Exporting it around the world, getting it to the hotspots that are still trying to manage the spread of this disease. It's going to be an incredible undertaking. Possibly the most complicated logistical puzzle we have ever seen. It's going to make an iPhone release look like a tea party, folks. How are we going to manage our regular supply chains while all of this is happening? I don't really know how we will. I've always been very fond of saying that, hope is not a strategy. Many of us have hoped that we would never come into a situation like this. And we all looked at our bosses and we said, what could you expect me to do here? How could you expect me to think there'd be a pandemic? How could you expect me to think that there could be a trade war? Conversations about pandemics have been going on for years. Many people were in the news as soon as this happened, saying when the H1N1 virus happened, there was a constraint on supply chains. I had said it back in January. There were people who had talked steadily about what happens with regards to trade wars, going way back when the president was even running for president, talking about how this could affect supply chains and manufacturing. There are excuses, but then there are plans. And as we are beginning to see something on the horizon, specifically Brexit, I think it's important that we stress the fact that you are in a position to do something. Brexit is something that you can still make moves on. You can understand how it's going to affect your supply chain, understand how it's going to affect your tariff burden, understand how it's going to affect your transfer pricing, and understand how it's going to affect your relationship with your clients. And do something about it now. Make plans to deal with it now, before it's too late. Honestly, you never really know what you could do or uncover, or how you can make things better. I only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to focus them on the broader picture that I don't think anyone's talking about. The United States has lost From what we can understand, just on looking at macro data, so looking at large heat map, big data, somewhere in the neighborhood of 80,000 small businesses between March the 1st and July 25th. Who knows how many people were employed in those small businesses? And that number is probably underreported. Good estimate is that we'll probably lose another 20,000 to 25,000 more by the time the fall rolls around. That's terrifying when you begin to consider it. And how many people do those businesses employ? The economic ramifications in our country are something that we believe that we can recover upon simply by having people engage in the economy again when vaccines start, when people begin to work again, when our service economy begins to rally up again. What does this mean for the rest of the global economy? We are the world's largest economy, to be sure, but we support the rest of the world. And the rest of the world's economy buys our exports. I don't believe that we paid enough attention understanding all of the things that are happening outside of our borders and how this pandemic and the slowdown, quote, shutdown of our economy is affecting those economies as well. And to be very honest with you, I don't think we spent enough attention, as myopic as we are as Americans, about what it can mean for the rest of the world. Your region, your part of the world, has a lot to do with much of the innovation that we've talked about, not just things like agriculture, not just things like manufacturing, but some of the key bleeding edge ideas and technology that are going to lead this country into the next century. We need these people in these other nations buying these goods, buying these ideas to keep our economy running and to keep these next generations in these jobs, these wonderful jobs that will sustain them and their employment and keep our country on the leading edge of other economies. We've got to find a way to stay up there, got to find a way to stay at the top edge, that leading edge of economies. And it means that we have to find ways to get those economies rolling again too. I'm hopeful, and like I said, hope's not a strategy, so I hope we come up with a plan soon. Do what you can, don't point fingers. Instead, look at ways to make it better. It will get better. There are people a lot smarter than me working on the plan. I really appreciate you all giving me an opportunity to speak with you today. I know I'm at the end of my time, and I certainly do hope that all of you have a wonderful time here with the rest of the program. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. Thank you so much.
Please welcome from Children's Mercy Hospital, Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer, Dr. Robert Steele.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Rob Steele from Children's Mercy, and I'm the Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer here. It is my pleasure to be speaking at this truly global event from right here in Kansas City. While Children's Mercy Hospital is proud to call Kansas City home and serve so many wonderful families from this region, we also serve families from around the world. We deliver services to children from more than 50 countries across 6 continents. And much like the global nature of this event, we are able to use technology to treat patients from around the world. Through state-of-the-art telemedicine, Children's Mercy International Services coordinates care for children and their families who come from abroad. And we collaborate with medical professionals to improve the health care of children from all over the world. Of course, Children's Mercy is just one of many organizations and businesses giving Kansas City a footprint that spans across oceans. The Kansas City footprint has grown over the years, and so has our reputation as an innovative and forward-thinking community. I'm pleased now to welcome our next speakers who will play a large role in that innovation. Mark Johnson of Dentons Law Firm and Kansas City's own Mayor Quinton Lucas. Mayor Lucas has just marked his first year serving as the 55th mayor of Kansas City. And just as an aside, he starts his mayorship and is celebrating with the chiefs with their face masks of their uniform, and then has to transition immediately into face masks with COVID. So hats off to Mayor Lucas for being able to do that kind of transition. It's been quite a year for him. But as mayor, his priorities have included safer neighborhoods, accessible and affordable housing and public transportation, and improving basic services. And as Kansas City's reputation grows on an international level, his office is always looking at ways to enter and strengthen our global economy. Please welcome Mark Johnson and Mayor Lucas for today's fireside chat on the future of Kansas City's global trade.
Mayor Lucas, it's a pleasure to see you, even if virtually, and to welcome you to our program. Now that you've finished here in August, can you tell us what you view as Kansas City's strengths in the area of international commerce?
Well, it is good to be with you all, and I didn't catch all the questions from Mark, but I think I'll be able to make it through. It's exciting to be here for a fireside chat. It is interesting during this era because we have a lot of chats from our offices. I never thought I'd be sitting here so much, but in some ways it's more amazing because I get to visit with groups like yours and so many others, not just here in Kansas City, but around the world. I did an interview with the BBC last week. I think I have another one coming up. And in this, you get to see the story of Kansas City that we share. So a few things about Kansas City that are particularly important for all of us. As you all know, while we sit in the geographic center of the United States, in some ways in the political center of the United States, you recognize that we're strategically located for success, not just in America, but the world over. 85% of the US population is reachable within 1 to 2 business days of Kansas City. We're the second largest rail center in the nation, all these things that you've heard about over the years. But something that's more intriguing, we're a place where doing business is accessible, where it is easier than many places, where the costs are right, and where I think you can build and attract outstanding talent. My job as mayor is to make sure that we do an even better job of building that talent, building entrepreneurial international talent for us to be competitive, not just with jurisdictions around here, but all around the country and all around the world. And so I think we are in a good place. We export services very well. We have a very low cost of doing business as compared to many other places. I think we find a hospitable political environment, if I may say so myself. And frankly, we're a place that continues to build in recognition all the time. Before I was mayor, and well before COVID, I got to travel internationally on occasion. So I've been to Copenhagen a number of times, and I always have enjoyed whenever I went and talked about where I was from. Kansas City is recognizable. The question for us is, how do we sell it? How do we build it? How do we let people know the great story of Kansas City now?
Mayor, you've got 3 years more in office unless another opportunity arises. What opportunities do you see for Kansas City in the international area?
You know, there are a few different opportunities for Kansas City in the international arena, one of which is how do we leverage, I think, ourselves as a real market center for design professional services. We have heard about Kansas City as a place of engineering firms, other design build firms, et cetera. I think we want to continue to sell that as a city that's a go-to place for those types of services. I think another thing that you will see for the future of Kansas City is how do we actually make sure that we let people know we're a place of diverse backgrounds, not just racially, but also geographically, right, internationally. I have an office where a number of the folks were born in different countries. I think that's the sort of thing that we need to make sure people know and recognize, because it's not always what you think about the American Midwest. And then I think sometimes for a place like Kansas City, and we're not unique, St. Louis deals with it, Pittsburgh, others, making sure that people know that they can find almost everything they need here from a business development opportunity. Top flight legal services, like those I believe you'd get from Mark Johnson and his colleagues, right? Top flight professional services, accounting, et cetera, right? All of that is in Kansas City. And I think as we look at the fallout of COVID-19, when people are saying, well, maybe we don't all need to be in the same place. Maybe this isn't the time for New York City necessarily, or wanting to be even in London. But instead, how do we find major cities that offer much of what we need, while at the same time not having some of the same kind of pains and concerns that we may otherwise see?
Well, I can assure you that I didn't pay the mayor anything for that plug, but thank you. Mayor, how do we how do we help you get the word out? Get the word out about what's available in Kansas City to help business?
You know, a few things, I think. The first thing we note is that we want to make sure that wherever you're doing business, wherever you travel, you are brand ambassadors for Kansas City. I had the fortune of being a brand ambassador for Kansas City well before I became mayor of this wonderful city, but I need that from all of you. I think the other thing that we have to say is to continue to develop here in Kansas City. So on one side, I was saying, when you're out of the country, there are goals and efforts you have to take. But when you're here in Kansas City, making sure that you are fostering in your businesses and professional organizations and associations, events for those with different backgrounds or who are involved in international commerce, making sure that your businesses build a greater understanding of export rules, et cetera. For those of us, for example, I'm an attorney myself, right, trying to push the Bar Association to do more to foster Kansas City's reputation as an international city. Those are some of the things that I think can be important and helpful for us. But the other thing that I think is vital is in the talent that you attract. Attracting talent of different backgrounds, attracting talent with different connections around the world allows us to sell our city in the best way possible, which is through friends, which is through networks, which is through professional associations. That is more than what we might be able to think with anything. I have friends I can call in a number of different places right now. A lot of that's not based on any program I was in. It's based on the fact that I knew them at some point. Continuing to do that, continuing to take the opportunity to sell Kansas City and your businesses is the best way that we can get that work done.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more about the importance of developing and maintaining relationships to tell people about what's going on here in Kansas City. Unfortunately, we can't ignore the gorilla sitting in the corner, if you will, and that's COVID. How has COVID-19 affected your ability, the Kansas City area's ability to attract and retain business?
You know, I think the challenge is none of us know right now. None of us know the extent to which we will all be troubled and challenged by COVID-19. I certainly do not. And so I think we need to continue to do work to make sure that first, we're trying to sustain our business community, trying to make sure our business community survives. That's step one. I think step two is that we need to continue actually, and it's counterintuitive. It's almost like when you are in a car and you slide on ice, right? They tell you to just steer in the direction of the slide, not to just start spinning out of control by fighting a lot of it. And so I think in this, we need to continue to invest in things like economic development, efforts to attract international businesses and programs. We need to continue to invest in international business marketing. We need to continue to invest in a lot of those core functions of broad-based economic development and outreach that seem counterintuitive at this time. You know, there is this desire right now to try to hide for the moment and say, well, maybe we can weather it if we don't spend money, if we don't invest in the Convention and Visitors Bureau, if we don't do any work to make sure that we can actually handle the challenges ahead. I think that would be a mistake. And so I know my job is to continue to spread brand Kansas City. Our jobs have to continue to be to try to support businesses and frankly to better leverage stimulus dollars if we get them from the federal government and CARES Act dollars that we can use towards business relief, both large and small, to make sure that we are actually doing some of that essential marketing. I hate to say it because everything is so left-right right now in American politics, but the governor of Missouri, whom I do not plan to necessarily vote for in the next election, did something interesting when they talked about using federal CARES Act dollars on tourism in Missouri. Now, perhaps the type of tourism, I might have made a different choice, but it is not actually an awful idea to try to make sure that you are still sharing and selling your brand, particularly as we talk about what the recovery looks like. It may be far off, but it is never too early to have people thinking about your city, thinking about how you're weathering a storm, thinking about how we actually can handle these steps much better.
Mayor Pete Mento, who was our keynote, was talking about what he called strategic sourcing. In other words, looking for places to manufacture your products other than in the situation he was talking about China, and he mentioned a number of countries. I wonder if you could comment on the possibility of trying to bring that manufacturing to Kansas City itself. I mean, particularly in the time of COVID-19, manufacturing of the critical products such as PPE and pharmaceuticals. Is there some way that we could help you in trying to develop that kind of manufacturing capability here in the area?
You know, I think that is probably the next significant step to not only help Kansas City, but help Kansas City's east side community. For those of you who aren't Kansas Cityans, you know there are areas of our city that have had and suffered from significant economic underinvestment for decades, really. One of my goals since I was on the city council, certainly a goal of mine as mayor, is enhanced investment in the Blue Valley industrial area and the East Bottoms as well. The idea being those are all areas that are on bus routes. Those are all areas where we have access to labor, but frankly, where there is not enough work. And so I think we do have a competitive advantage in many ways, both when you look at some of the quality of education around us, when you look at certainly the position we have in the country for shipping thereafter, and then we also can be competitive in terms of, at least in the United States, labor costs as compared to major cities that may be closer to significant markets. I think selling that all as a package, particularly as we see different trade rules and regulations that have come from Washington in recent years, more protectionism in policy, which I think actually is not just unique to Republican administrations, but may be copied once more in our upcoming, in a potential Democratic administration. Sorry, got ahead of myself. I think those are the sorts of things that will help us say, well, Kansas City is perfect for that particular situation. But I will say this, when we talk about industrial development, you can't necessarily divorce, I think, our educational community from it. While we look at certain goods as affordable, et cetera, and labor being the sort of thing that folks prefer cheaper labor in some situations, I think you also are seeing sophistication and sophisticated areas be a basis for where people and companies want to be. Where do they want to actually do those significant factory investments? And that's where Kansas City also has to make sure our educational community, ranging from classic tertiary education, jobs training, work skills programs, can be part of our pitch, particularly to American companies, but perhaps beyond, as to why they should plant their flag here in the middle of the country.
Mayor, another important aspect of promoting international commerce in Kansas City is is airport capacity. I wonder if you could tell us how things stand with the new terminal construction, and then tell us how, when that comes online, it's going to be able to help Kansas City in developing its attraction of international commerce.
Yeah, it is essential, and this is another one where we have to stay the course, right? It's a challenging time for the aviation industry. I don't know if any of you have flown in recent months. I have, I think, flown a few times, and it is a very different airport experience. Almost any American airport, in some ways I joke that it's actually the most pleasant time to fly ever, because there's almost no one there. There's no one trying to sit close to you at all, and that's to be appreciated. But we all know that we will get back to normal at a certain point. And we also know that our investment in KCI wasn't just on pure customer satisfaction as a metric, but also our ability to handle greater business travel, hopefully to attract more flights, not just to major American cities, but those north and south of us, Mexico and Canada, but then ultimately to Europe or any overseas trips as well. We are on time. We're still under budget. We continue to try week to week to make sure that politics kind of stay out of the airport building process. But I've been heartened by the progress we've made so far. We did not lose time during the stay-at-home orders because construction was an exempted industry. And we will continue to hope to herald that success as we get closer to our 2023 opening day for KCI.
Mayor, let me ask you a couple of questions about sports. I know you and I are big sports fans. Can you tell us how the Chiefs' Super Bowl victory has helped Kansas City, particularly, with respect to, other parts of the country, and they're becoming more conscious of Kansas City?
You know, sports does so much for sharing brand, spreading brand. Even if you don't necessarily like the university or anything of that sort, seeing its name somewhere, right, is emblazoned on your mind in some ways. I have one of my best friends from growing up went to Duke University. I think nothing of Duke. I'm not a big fan, more because I don't like their basketball. But when I see their name, I think of Duke. I think of him. I think of how he's doing, right? You built that sort of connection. Kansas City is the same story. When the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, I probably received about 200 messages from people outside of Kansas City. Why? Well, they were excited for me. They're excited for Kansas City, and it's a darn hard thing to miss. So, you know, one of the real misfortunes that we had coming out of COVID was because my plan was actually, I went down to the Super Bowl, I was very lucky, and I was at a few different events where I would meet with business people, and they said, well, we're taking a new look at Kansas City. We are thinking about, well, heck, if it's in this major league city kind of realm right now with sport, it must be a major league city with business, with law, with education, so much going on. And so it has been my thought that we really need to do more follow-ups in connection with that. The challenge was, you know, the world changed a lot, you know, not long after the Chiefs Super Bowl. And indeed, it had already started changing before then. If we are as successful next year, I think it'll be important for us as we go through the playoffs, as we get the attention, as we have the $500 million man in Patrick Mahomes. We need to make sure that we are also saying, hey, now that you've noticed Kansas City, learn something more about us. Learn about our outstanding business industry. Learn about our, frankly, our kindness, right? And the ease with which you can do business in Kansas City. Those are the steps that we have to take to make sure we're capitalizing on our great sports success.
That's great. Now, the second sports question does have an international aspect to it. I wonder if you could tell us where we stand in the effort to try to attract a World Cup game to Kansas City.
So there is a World Cup 2026 bid committee here in Kansas City. I had the fortune of participating in a Zoom conference with our friends at FIFA not too long ago. It was interesting, humbling, good questions. You know, a lot of it was based on those core basic things. It's funny that international investment is not too different from the investment we need each day in Kansas City. Questions relating to public transit, how will you get people around? Safety, how do you make sure people are safe when they're here? Questions relating to how quickly can you build up a business community to handle the influx of people that are coming? I think our answers were strong, but I think that shows you why it is important for those of us in government to make sure that we're always investing in some of those very important things along the way.
Do you think some additional investments, capital investments, will be necessary to attract that World Cup game here, or do we have the facilities now to do the job?
I think we have the sports facilities now. I think there's a question as to our public transportation apparatus in particular. We do need to make sure that we also have the hotel space to handle all these folks. That's why, although he was pilloried in many ways for it, my predecessor, Sly James, invested significantly in the Lowe's Hotel that I can see out of my window here at City Hall now. Those are some of the steps necessary for us to be ready. So we're selling those. We're letting people know how it can work. You know, I studied abroad in South Africa, and one of my greatest regrets was that some years later, the World Cup was there, and I had a few friends that had stuck around. And among the locations of the World Cup games in South Africa weren't just Johannesburg and Cape Town, cities you've heard of, but there was also a city in the Limpopo province and another city in a province by the name of Mpumalanga. I just like saying the name. And I remember thinking, my God, if they can actually get a game in Mpumalanga, which if you're thinking of it, you know, think about Salina, Kansas, then that means that we can find a way to be competitive, I think, with anyone. You know, we don't need to be the biggest place. We need to make sure we're a place that can handle the influx of traffic. And I think Kansas City is in a good place to do it, if Mpumalanga can.
That's great to hear. Now, when you're traveling nationally or even internationally, and people look at the map of the United States and they see Kansas City in the middle of it, how do you distinguish Kansas City from other places that would look close by, such as St. Louis and Denver and Oklahoma City and the like? How do you say, well, Kansas City is really where you should focus your attention?
You know, I think we do an amazing job mixing our culture the very interesting culture that we have in our community, with some of the things I've already discussed, our ease with which you can do business, the cost of development, the space we have, etc. When you look at each of those other cities, there are amazing things going for them. Denver, an amazing mountains. Oklahoma City certainly has business-friendly regulation, almost ad nauseum or ad infinitum, depending on your view. St. Louis has a lot of history. I think what we have to try to marshal is the fact that we can sell the jazz tradition, we can sell our musical culture, we can actually sell a lot of that, but we also are a good historic city. We're an historic city in the sense that this is not a city of lots of transplants, although I won't mind that one day. This is a city that hasn't actually grown too fast, which I think is a critique you hear both for Denver and Nashville. And there is still something interesting here. There's something interesting about the fact that whether you want to talk to the mayor or an important partner at Dentons law firm or anyone under the sun, a business leader, you can basically get to everybody in Kansas City with a call or two. You can figure out a way to make those connections. You can figure out a way to really get yourself involved in the business community. That's something that a lot of cities cannot offer. And I think that is a positive. If somebody's saying, well, where am I going to put a secondary facility? Where am I going to plan to invest with livelihoods of hundreds of my fellow workers or investors? You can say Kansas City because, you can kick the tires around a little. You can actually see what's going on. And I think that gives us a huge plus as we try to develop out our city.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, Quinton, one thing I've always found traveling around and going to various cities is that Kansas City is a remarkably welcoming town to outsiders, people who didn't grow up here, as opposed to some other places. Let me ask you about some sort of basic logistical issues. How much of an advantage or disadvantage do you think we have because of our location, because of where we are in the United States?
I think our location, certainly presents some challenges, but there are cities with much better locations that aren't able to capitalize upon them. Let's use as an example Hartford, Connecticut, really a great American city, classically, and along the I-95 corridor. It is a place that you would think would have been poised for better development. But as we saw a significant decline to the late 20th century, that told me that it wasn't geographic proximity that was vital. Shipping proximity is also something that perhaps we don't have, at least when we talk about seafaring ships. But it's kind of how do you deal with your challenges? How do you actually build an interesting city, a good business environment, and continue to work on attraction as best you can, notwithstanding whatever challenges you have that may exist. Atlanta, like us, is not on a body, well, we at least have a river rolling through. Atlanta's one of the few cities, I believe, in the world, actually, the major cities in the world, that isn't sitting on a prominent body of water. That has not slowed their ability to develop significantly, particularly around the Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. We need to make sure that we're using our public assets to the fullest to help support that sort of why Kansas City, why not type thing. Because you have places like Atlanta, Dallas, right? Those that aren't on coasts or anything of that sort, but that are a significant part of that next wave conversation in the United States. I'll add Austin to it. We need to remember that we have that same opportunity. The way you marshal and leverage it is based on what is it that we're investing in? What is it that we're doing? And what's the story of Kansas City that we're going to share? We can't just be a story of we're cheaper than everyone else. We can't just be a story of, well, always the bridesmaid, never the bride type of approach to economic development sometimes with Kansas City. What we need to actually say is we are dynamic, and there is a reason why somebody who gets even within 500 miles of us, if they get to the Chicagoland, we want to be in their ear and have people say, well, you know what, I looked at this place, Kansas City. It seems like they have a lot of wonderful things going on. I'm going to try it out. That's the sort of work that I think we should be doing along the way.
You made a point a couple of minutes ago about saying that you can get to the right people in Kansas City pretty quickly. I always talk about Kansas City as being a big small town. So, if you're new in town, through meeting one or two people, you can get to to the people that you really want to speak to. Do you have any sort of anecdotes about how Kansas City, being a big small town, can help us in developing our international commerce?
You know, there are a few different things that I think we should probably do more with in Kansas City to help sell ourselves as a strong international city and as a place that understands and is globally competitive. I know that a lot of what one talks about is how do we develop actually an ecosystem of talent so that whenever we get one big project, and this actually isn't unique to international economic development, it also relates to our regional efforts. How are we making sure that it isn't just, we want Amazon right now, we want one bidder, we want one company? Because we often try to say, all right, everybody, let's get to work, let's figure it out. But really, these are the steps we should be taking every day. These are the steps that, and the work we should be doing daily. And so I would think in terms of advice for some, leveraging, first of all, the international connections and relationships we have already. I've already mentioned the Dentons law firm. We have Kansas City Southern, which is in many ways a heavily Mexican company now, at least in a lot of the work that they do, right? We have international brands, and we continue to grow entrepreneurship. And smaller businesses, only by market cap, let's say, but businesses that have the fortune of us growing. You know, I've had the chance in my travels to visit Israel, where much of their work and growth and really the miracle they've had in economic development since the founding of Israel, now I guess plus more than 70 years ago, is the idea that they always try to foster new interesting technologies and talents. We need to see ourselves in the same way, whereas we're not just kind of stayed, we're not just a jurisdiction which, like others, has, you know, a power company, a government, some other things, but instead is saying, how do we, through incentives, look to encourage companies in Kansas City that might already be giving global solutions to any number of problems? How do we make sure that those companies know that they're supported, that they can survive at times like now, particularly in the COVID-19 era? And that's a lot of the focus that my office has had too. We have an economic development policy expert in the office. It has not been lost on her. She's a Princeton graduate. That you know, we have to exist in the world, and we have to compete in the big world. People aren't just going to stop through Kansas City and say, oh, that's great. Instead, we have to sell a message and a brand. And a lot of that brand is the people and the companies that we have here already.
Your Honor, how much of an issue is the state line these days?
Not much of one. You know, to be quite honest, there are very few people who see the state line. When I was first mayor, I, you know, was kind of thrust into our border war truce debates. And I remember dealing with the Secretary of Commerce for the state of Kansas. And maybe it's because I used to live in Hutchinson as a child, or I taught law at the University of Kansas like Mr. Johnson. But, you know, I think those of us who are smart about things know and understand that our work is really in making sure we're growing the entire community, in making sure that we're selling the Kansas City story, that we're selling, frankly, universities across the line, an outstanding journalism school at the University of Missouri, outstanding bio-ag investments at Kansas State University. I'm perhaps partially in the University of Kansas where I teach, but a number of different opportunities and options at an outstanding flagship university in Lawrence. I mean, those are the sorts of things that we want to sell to an international audience. And that, in that regard, we don't have lines. We have a place where we're trying to leverage all the millions of people that are in this Missouri-Kansas region, particularly in Northwest Missouri, Northeast Kansas. And that's the work that, even as mayor of just one small nugget of it all, I'm interested in doing each day.
Your Honor, we have, you know, a number of people in the audience who are involved in international business, but may not be aware of the types of support that are available from our, you know, municipalities. Can you tell us a little bit about the programs that Kansas City, Missouri has to support the development of international business, both export and import?
Well, you know, there are a few different things. One, we've recognized, and through our World Trade Center, and I know you all do the important work and the real work to sell Kansas City, to make sure that folks are understanding import-export policy, ensuring that we have trade zones that are adequately developed in areas of our city where we continue to offer greater incentives in the storage, production, shipment of commerce in Kansas City. What I would always recommend for you is if you're in touch with our World Trade Center, then that's one step. Our Economic Development Corporation of Kansas City works in international affairs as well. You can get access to both by calling 311 in Kansas City, but I think those are the sorts of things that we're trying to do. Another area of support that I think we can have is in supporting those who are innovators. CERN, a major company here, I believe it has more than 500 patents worldwide. We want to continue to, through more grants, through I think re-envisioning, and not all the way there yet, but re-envisioning what economic development incentives is going to be another way that we actually make that level of difference. And so it's all there now, but we need to, I think, try to enhance even more. A final effort and an important thing for us to do is working with our state legislatures. In Topeka, in Jefferson City, there's important work that we need to do to make sure that they're understanding different investment programs, some of which I remember being scuttled by Governor Greitens, are vital for how we can compete in Kansas City and St. Louis, and the same story on the Kansas side of the line. So I'll continue to reach out to our leaders statewide and nationally to make sure that they are part of selling that Kansas City story as well.
Governor, of course, Governor, boy, there's a Freudian slip. Mayor, let me ask you this, with the announcement just within the past hour that Senator Harris from California is going to be the Democratic candidate for vice president. Can you give us, your thoughts as to how the upcoming election might affect us here in the Kansas City region in our development of international business?
Yeah, I think right now this is a time when everything is far too aggressive, it's far too partisan, and I hope we are past that after November 4th. And so I think much of what we have to do is tell people there will be a tomorrow. These are very significant challenges, and I deal with them daily in terms of racial issues, COVID-19, a suspension of travel to a number of countries. It is a real challenge, but we have to, almost like a Democratic campaign much longer ago, the Roosevelt campaign in 1932, note that we will get those happy days at some point again. They're not here again yet, but and at that point, we will have a business community. We will have shipping that can be done in Kansas City. We'll continue to have a hospitable environment for the future of development in Kansas City. And so I think in some ways not getting pulled into those sorts of very caustic debates. I'm somebody who gets on television sometimes and may be a part of them, but it's doing a quick in and out. It's saying, all right, well, we'll find a way to solve it. But really right now, let's also say, well, we still want development. So I had a phone call with the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, a few weeks ago, right? I believe I'll be talking to Secretary Mnuchin soon. I mean, these are the sorts of things that we have to continue to do to work across the aisle with those who are reasonable enough for us to do so, to make sure we're getting things done.
Well, that's great. Now, we just have a couple of minutes left. I want to ask you a question that I always ask. That is, what haven't I asked you that you would like to say something about?
I think, in the deepest sense, it is coping with the current moment. It is making sure that you take care of yourself, your families, your business, but that you're an optimist. I read an obituary actually the other day, and it talked about a woman who was a stubborn optimist her entire life. We know business. I do, you do much better. And a big part of what we do in connection with that is selling our own enthusiasm for this market, our own enthusiasm for the future of business. And I think that, as much as anything, is where we can help restore community confidence, not just in Kansas City, but frankly in ongoing business activity, including international commerce.
Right. Well, it's always wonderful to have an opportunity to speak with you. You and I are friends. We've known each other for a long time. We're colleagues, of course, over at KU. And I'm just thrilled when you were elected. I think you've done a fantastic job in a very, very difficult job and under terribly difficult circumstances. I hope your job gets a little bit easier sometime in the near future. I don't know.
I hope too. I hope so too.
Yes. So again, thank you so much for your valuable time, and keep in touch.
We will, and thank you all for fighting the good fight. I appreciate you. We look forward to much better days ahead and getting together in person along the way. You all have a fine day.
Thank you.
Please welcome Chair of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, Carolyn Watley.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Special thanks to our keynote speaker, Pete Mento, and Mayor Lucas for joining us for his thoughts on where KC is headed when it comes to the global economy. And another round of congratulations for our award winners today, the Overland Park Chamber Economic Development Council and Commerce Bank. With our economy in flux right now, it is so important to be able to gain insight from events like this so we can look at international trade from all angles. This year has reinforced to the business community that innovation and the ability to pivot quickly are more important than ever. Opening your business to an international trade market can be one of those innovations, and the World Trade Center Kansas City can help you. WTC KC is part of a robust network of more than 300 World Trade Centers around the world. And right now, you're going to be able to directly connect to that network through technology. You can network with members of World Trade Centers from across the globe. You'll find links to the breakout rooms that you signed up for in your email. Just go to that link and follow the prompt. This is one of the benefits of having Go Global virtual this year. Once again, thanks to all of our sponsors today, our participants, and our winners. Good luck to the Small WIDA Award nominees in the Small Business Celebration. And thank you for joining us. Have a good afternoon and enjoy your breakout rooms.